Stand clear.
100% Wild Podcast.
So for all you listeners,
hello and welcome to
definitely not your favorite outdoor podcast.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Drury Outdoors 100% Wild Podcast. We're powered by DeerCast, and if you're counting, this is episode number 275.
Hey, we're closing in on 300, buddy.
Listen.
Listen here.
You're Matt Drury.
You're Tim Chelswick.
And we're the dynamic duo of nothing.
We're here every day.
That's about all we can say. Hey, I wanted to catch you up. So my safe buck, the taxidermy for that, I may be 50 by the time I get that back.
Well, it happens. Taxidermy, it seems like every year it takes longer and longer to get taxidermy.
I'm 43
back.
right now. So I called the taxidermist because he said, back in November when I killed him, he said it'd be about 6 to 8 months. I called him last week and he said, we are just now getting forms in. We haven't started on any of our whitetails.
Holy cow.
And, so I killed my deer mid to late November. So he's got all of deer season 21, prior to late November to catch up on before he touches them.
So is this a product of the kind of backlog that we're seeing in everything?
It's
manufacturing?
The Putin price hike.
What is?
The Putin price hike.
The Putin price hike.
Putin did it.
All right. I wonder where his farms come from. Is that something that's done overseas?
I kind of guessed Mackenzie, but I'm not sure. I think that's the taxidermy supply. But I'm not sure where they're coming from. Just that he didn't have them until last week, and he's got a lot of catching up to do.
That hurts.
So it's a sword that cuts both ways, right? Because I think he charges like $500. So I just keep putting that cost off for a while.
Let you save up to actually be able to pay for it by the time it gets here.
Beth,
kids' college account, safe buck.
No, the kids aren't going to college. The kids won't have shoes.
Hey, I stopped by Tim's house this weekend unannounced. So I pull up and his daughter was out in the yard and I said, "Hey, is your dad here?" And she ran inside. So Tim
was she scared?
She looked scared. Tim comes to the door and he sees me and he just shuts the door
slowly as I maintain eye contact.
Yeah. So, and then the reason why I thought of this, his son didn't have shoes on. So he's not lying, and his daughter didn't either. So.
None of the kids in our neighborhood wear shoes. He just gets up in the morning and prances out the door with no shoes on.
Yeah.
So.
All righty. Well, this week we're excited. We have Mr. Mark Drury on with us. What's up, Mark?
How you doing, guys?
We're doing good. So you're there at your place in Iowa, and it's that time of year where most people are starting to get cameras out. You guys obviously you've been hard at it, and you and the team there every day since the season stopped to get geared up for this fall. And I always find it interesting, kind of your strategy towards cameras. You still have not put out your cameras yet, correct?
We have not. I generally try to target about the 25th of July to the end of the month, because it seems like I used to put them out quite early, and then all my results always occurred the first 2 weeks of August. So we just make sure we're out a little bit ahead of that. And it's quite a deployment when we do go to deploy cameras. So it's all hands on deck, and it'll take us a few days to get them all running. And none of those will be cellular. We're just putting out our standard cameras, and then we'll check them, a month later and take a good inventory. So we try to put them on, either summertime scrapes that we've noticed from years past. In other words, big hub scrapes that get used during the summer, not necessarily scraping, but just communal stuff with deer coming by and checking them. Or we'll put them on a small pile of analogic supplement gold, which, we get most of our bucks on that, quite frankly. And that gives you a little boost of health going into a stressful time right now here during the late summer. We're pretty dry up here, so it's time to start giving them a little benefit of supplement gold.
Sure. So what's the strategy behind not putting out cell cameras when you deploy your other cameras, here in a couple of weeks?
Mostly battery and just time. I guess it's not important to us to know where they're at right now. We'll deploy those cell cameras just a week or so ahead of the Missouri season, and then we'll deploy cell cams in Iowa a week ahead of that. So we just don't put them out until it's time. Battery battery and cellular data for the most part. The cost. Last year I spent like close to $3,000 on cellular data just through the season. So I want to reduce that as much as possible.
Yeah. So basically you take them like Reconyx, you take it out of hibernation there right at the beginning of the season. And then realistically you could put it back in hibernation in end of January, early February. And
January.
Yeah.
So we take them down the moment the season ends and shut them down for the season. So we just try to minimize, the spend there.
Sure.
I was going to say with the analogics, I mean, so I have three properties overall that I'm trying to manage right now. 2 are leases, and on one of those leases, we're not allowed to use any. It's a county where you're not allowed in Missouri to use any mineral or supplements or anything like that. And it is a much different strategy of trying to get your inventory. And I never really truly know what we have. But like, for instance, yesterday, Scott was out at the Ellsbury lease and he put out some analogics. We can put it out in that county. And, basically by the end of the night, I felt like I knew exactly all the bucks I had on the farm. So it's just interesting.
It's crazy, isn't it? I mean, it's the best way to take summer inventory, but you're right. What a vast difference in counties where it's not legal. I'm in the same shape in Mercer in Missouri. I can't put it out there. So we just depend on trails and mowed paths and entry trails from historic usage. So, and boy, it's not even close to the same, but on the other hand, you get surprises there. Whereas
it's fun.
Where you're able to put analogics out, you kind of know what your season is within the first 2 weeks. You basically know who you're hunting and what they look like this year for previous years.
Yeah. Specifically in Ellsbury, I was like, all right, so here, nothing really was overly exciting to me. We have a pretty decent deer, but he looks like he might be young. So it's like, okay, we did the same exact thing last year where I had the early inventory and we basically didn't hunt the farm until it got right there towards the gun season. Yeah. And we went in and sure enough, the deer that we killed were the deer that we had on analogics, early on in summer. So it is, to your point about the surprise or not, it's almost like it's good to know. And it kind of helps me set up my season. Like instantly I'm thinking, okay, we're not going to mess around in there unless we're wanting to go in and kill some does or something. We're not really going to mess around until it's the right time. And we're going to have shift our earlier season strategy over at the other farm where there may be a couple bigger deer. And so I don't know, it does help you kind of put your strategy together early on.
Yeah. So Crawford County is where the Bourbon cattle ranch that I hunt is. It's a CWD county, no mineral, no supplemental feeding or anything. Plus I've got cattle on the ground.
The worst.
So it's really difficult to get any kind of, I mean, that's a great surprise farm because you just don't know what you'll end up with because it's so hard to do inventory from the outset. Mark, I had a personal question for you. You're wearing mossy oak right now. Like if you need to run into town, how often are you wearing camo versus just normal street clothes?
The days that I'm really happy, I'm wearing camo because it puts me in a good mood. I love this stuff because it's so cool and we're in a very, very warm time right now. So I wear it because it's cool. It's also the shirt that I have treated with my tick spray. So I have a tendency to wear it often. Same with my pants. I'm wearing really light colored pants so that I can see ticks. So that I can see ticks. They're very light in weight and also light in color. So this is really as much about tick prevention as anything else. And it's the coolest clothing that I have.
You sent us an article there about this tick, this new tick disease or something that's kind of new. Tell us about that. That's a good point to jump off on. And you don't have to give the details as to how you found out about it, but give us the details as to what this is, just so we can tell our audience to be on the lookout for it.
Well, Grant had actually sent me the article, and it's because Grant and I were conversing, Dr. Grant Woods, last week about some other stuff, and he told me that he had been bitten by a tick in Alabama. And he said, I made a mistake and I didn't shower off while I was there. I drove home because I wanted to sleep in my bed that night. So he got bit and didn't find the tick till probably a day or two later, started to get ill, eventually got very, very ill. And his wife took him to a doctor. They still hadn't found the tick bite. And the doctor said, this is beyond what we can treat here. And they life flighted him to Mayo. Like he was quite ill. And but that small town doctor had started him on doxycycline just in case, because Grant's an outdoorsman. And I think that's a point to listeners. Like, if you ever get feeling poor and the doctors can't figure out what it is, number one, insist on a tick panel when you do blood work so that they can dig deeper. And number two, ask them to start you on doxycycline just in case it is indeed a tick-borne illness, because that small town doctor starting him early, he felt like saved his life by the time he got to Mayo. By the time they figured out what he had, and I have trouble pronouncing.
He had ehrlichiosis, I think.
Yep, that's it. By the time they figured out what he had, it took him a while, but he had started that round of doxycycline. So if people don't take anything else away from this podcast, ask for that tick panel and ask to be started on doxycycline just in case, because you can always stop it if it's not a tick-borne illness. But the article you're referencing, Matt, is one that Grant sent me, and it's a whole new tick illness, and it's already killed a couple people, and they say it's increasing. And they say a lot of the reason that the tick-borne illnesses are increasing, because the tick population is increasing, because we don't have as cold of winters. The winters don't last as long, and they say it's because of our climate's changing currently. And if you ask anybody that goes outdoors, they'll all say the same thing. My goodness, the ticks are just terrible anymore. I mean, and they are. They're really, really thick. So there's things you can do to prevent that. I spray down every 2 or 3 days with permethrin. I bathe in BioShield religiously. I use BioShield also on my clothing. And you really do need to check yourself for ticks every single day, because it's our big threat as outdoorsmen right now. One of the greatest threats we face.
We've got an article coming in DeerCast on this. It's called the Powassan virus. And so it's crazy because, I mean, literally it's an arms race. It's a biological arms race, because there are these new, like, ehrlichiosis wasn't a thing for a long time. And then one of my staff members at the camp I used to run got it back in like 2006. It nearly killed him. It shut his liver function down. Yep. And we keep finding like these new diseases that ticks are the vector for. And so it's an arm race. We got to keep up with it, but yeah, keep it on top of it. And if you find a tick that's been on you for any given amount of time, it's not a bad idea to save the tick. Just in case you get sick, they can run a panel on that particular tick and see exactly what you had, and then treat you, then really dial in your treatment for it.
How do you save them? What do you put them in?
A little baggie or something, just something that you're not going to lose it. And then, you pull it off and you're fine for the, next 5 days or whatever. It's no big deal. Just toss it.
I've taken pictures of them before, just in case, like took a picture of it before I killed it.
Take pics on your phone.
Yeah, that's, I got lots of tick pics.
Yeah. You can delete them if you need to. Just take it to storage.
Moving on.
Alan over here is going to lose it. He's not pleased.
No one is.
That's what she said.
That was actually pretty quick-witted, Tim. I'm very impressed.
Mark is surprised. I'm actually surprised, Tim.
But you don't say that.
So trail cams are about to roll out. What else are you guys doing on your farms right now, Mark?
A lot of food plot prep. We're really, really dry, so we are going to try and no-till as many of our green plots as we can, just to try and preserve that moisture that's in the soil. We're not going to do much conventional tillage this fall, which is different than what we've done in the past.
Can you explain no-till real quick for folks that maybe don't know what that is?
Well, what we'll go in and we'll take an area and scalp it right now with a mower. So mow it in the lowest setting, perhaps mow it twice to really chop everything up, so you don't have a lot of residue laying there to stop sun hitting the soil so that seeds can germinate. So we try to really get it down to just about bare dirt with the mower. And then we'll go in with a Genesis and no-till in our seeds. So we're not going in and tilling it. We're not disking it. We're just going to till straight into the soil.
Okay.
We've had pretty good luck with that in the past, especially on big green fields. Some of the smaller ones and the ones that are out there in our bean fields that we're carving out, then we'll go ahead and till it so that we've got a seed bed and we get all the bean plants mixed in. But if it's just an area that we've planted in the past or a new area that's been grass, we've been mowing it short in preparation for this to make sure that we can get it down to bare dirt, and we'll no-till it in.
Okay.
So if you, and I don't have a no-till drill, but I have that ground breaker, and I was at the new farm yesterday and noticed that a couple of the areas that we're going to put fall food plots in, the weeds were really, really tall. And so the plan is we were going to go in and spray it, let it die off, and then mow it real short. Is that the way to go, or would you reverse that? Go in now and mow it and get it down real short, and then, put weed killer on here in a couple weeks in preparation for the planting.
If I was in that situation where it's already real tall, how tall is it?
I mean, it was probably knee to thigh high in some areas.
Yeah, like the best bet for that would be to kill it and then fire burn it. But that's quite dangerous this time of the year. Like, you want to get rid of all that. So, if you do kill it first and then mow it, and you could mow it 2 or 3 times and try and chop that stuff up so that it doesn't prevent, soil contact to the ground.
Yeah, that's kind of
sunlight contact. Rather.
That's kind of what I was worried about, is just the amount of dead grass thatch or whatever laying on top of, what we would then till up.
Yeah. Well, that's not going to hurt anything. I mean, just mow it a few times. It'll chop it right up.
Okay.
I mean, it gets pretty fine, and it'll mix right into the dirt.
Okay.
If you're going to use conventional tillage.
Yeah. All the rest of the stuff, he's been on top of. He's been a godsend for me as we're trying to get DeerCast out the door and the TV shows. I haven't been able to go out as much, and he's stayed on top. That combination of chemical that you guys have perfected up there and given us for like our clover, it's unbelievable. He sent me pictures. He was at Ellsbury yesterday, and what we thought was going to be dead, and we had to replant all this fall. I said, at the beginning of the year, I was like, let's just try this and see what happens. And it looks beautiful. I mean, it's like the best clover we've ever had. Mm-hmm. So it's saved us a lot of work here in the next couple of weeks.
That's awesome. I'm glad it's working for you. Clover's one of those crops that you have to be a very patient food plotter, because it takes a little bit for it to actually pop. And when it does, it seems like they all pop at once. It can go from looking like the worst food plot you've ever had, and all of a sudden it's a green carpet. So patience is always needed when it comes to establishment of new clover plots.
Yeah, he said there wasn't a blade of grass in it. And, of course, pretty much the entire Midwest got hit with a really good rainfall this weekend. Yeah. And I thought, man, this week, I bet it really does well for all that clover. So it looks good.
Not the entire Midwest. We're burning up here in Iowa.
Oh, you guys didn't get hit with any of that?
We've missed the last 2 in a row. I looked at DeerCast last night. In the last 35 days, I've had 2.5 inches. That's it.
Yeah, I've been dialed into the DeerCast maps. And I'm sure that our listeners that listen from week to week have heard us talk about this, but the 2 features right now have been key. It's the radar, the Doppler radar that's in there. And Sunday, like, I was just watching it basically all Sunday to check check my waypoints at each of the farms to see if I was getting hit, and then rain stations to see what I got. And I got a decent amount across almost all my pieces. So
I really like the predictable part of rain station as well. It tells you what you got, it tells you the next 3 days. I mean, that's a pretty cool feature. Or if you drop down and you really want to see what's predicted over the next 10 days, you can put in forward thinking dates and it'll tell you what's predicted over the next 10 to 14 days. Not that it's that accurate, but at least gives you hope or breaks your heart, whichever the case may be.
That's right. Yeah. I mentioned it in another podcast that it was like, hey, what I like to do is look at the 14, especially right now as we're getting towards food plotting. We have a little bit more to do this year than we normally do. Nothing obviously on the scale that you guys do or Terry and Forrest do, but a lot for us based on the equipment that we have and the time to do it. And so I said, I'm looking at that 14, I'm pulling that 14-day forecast down and trying to look out to see if there's any rain events coming. And just as we get closer to like mid-August, I'm going to try to utilize that to plan ahead. Like, hey, use the seed coat, put it in the ground, and then, hopefully if the rain totals are high enough in that 14-day period, try to catch that rain. Now, if it's just like a little bit, you're probably doing more harm than good if it germinates and then it burns up. So I'm also trying to watch out for that. But it is nice to look out in that 14 days and just kind of stay in front of it.
Yeah.
It's the magic of clover. Like, it'll sit there and wait for that rain and then green up. Even if you have a really dry period putting your green fields in and the seeds swell and they don't do well, or you don't get germination or you don't get rain, when it finally does rain, that clover greens up very quickly. Once that root system is established, it's the ultimate all around Greenfield, man. I love clover.
Do you guys then, like, from say now till, start of the season, will you go and put any more fertilizer or anything on top of your clover or spray it with anything?
I wouldn't until it kind of goes into a bit of a midsummer dormancy right now. So you probably would have more benefit if you waited till like September to do that stuff, when you could expect some rainfalls to take that fertilizer in and keep it green throughout October and give an extra boost to try and take it as deeply into the fall as you can. Same way with spraying. I like to spray generally in late May, early June, and then again in September. I only spray them twice a year, and they stay pretty dadgum clean. You'll get a few summer weeds, but it's important right now not to stress that clover, because it's already going into a stressful time with the heat. So we have a tendency to not mow it. You might get unsightly because there's a few extra weeds, that type of stuff, but we wait till we start getting some consistent rainfalls to make sure that we have growth coming before we mow, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
One of the standards, like a theme that comes across whenever you talk to consistent big buck killers, is intrusion, and don't do it. So Mark, I'm curious, as you're thinking about your prep schedule, how, like, when, so Iowa starts October 1, Missouri starts September 15. When do you want all your stands checked, your blinds, all that stuff taken care of so you can back out of there and not step foot in until you're ready to hunt?
As far as like a lot of what we do is on a piece of equipment. So the intrusion to me is not at the level of if you're out there walking your farms or looking, scouting, we would never think of doing that. Right. So we will do it all the way up through just about the start of September, but it's a piece of equipment because we're in there. You got to put the seed in or whatever, go in, drill the place, and you're done. Or we'll go check it from afar. So we're just very careful about wind directions and what we're in there on. So I think there's differing levels of intrusion. As far as like checking cameras and whatnot, we'll put them out. And then we'll leave them alone once we get our cell cameras going. But, call it late August, early September in answer to your question.
Okay, good. Yeah.
But we're minimal up to that point as well. We minimize it year round. So to qualify that answer, like we are always minimizing intrusion to the point that we can.
Yeah. And that's something I'm thinking about right now, because I've got 4 different properties that I got to go in and move some stands around and refresh mineral sites. And I'm trying to get my list of things I want to do at each site set so that when I go there, I've got everything I need and get everything done in one shot, and then back out and just let it sit until I'm ready to hunt.
Well, and I know like Terry and Forrest, they basically started in January and February, where they had a couple, in Illinois, a deer that they're after this year, and Missouri, a deer that they're after. And they started making micro adjustments back then so that they don't really have to do as much of that right now. And I know you guys are always working towards those type of adjustments too. Is there a certain deer or a certain, I know that you have kind of satellite farms here and there and everywhere throughout Missouri and Iowa, but are there certain target animals that you knew at the end of last year that it's like our last season that, hey, this season we're hopeful that these are the deer that show back up, and we might go in and spring and do a couple things to kind of be done with it and be prepared for these deer?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, we've got a few on our mind, and 2 or 3 of them live on the same farm, believe it or not. And then you always have surprises. Like every year when we check that first run, we'll be like, oh, that deer blew unexpectedly. And those are things that you can't anticipate. So then you might switch a plan just a little bit. But by and large, we've had the properties that I have right now for a few years. So we feel pretty good about our plan going in. No matter what deer pops up where, we've got a plan to kill him on each farm. Because they're small farms, so where the food plots go are pretty evident. So it's a matter of, then looking back through history as to when that deer daylighted the most, and then making your plan around the deer as opposed to the farm and how the farm's laid out. So once we get intel and we find out who the main targets are this year, then we'll start laying out plans for them. And I kind of have on some already, just deer that are very mature that we definitely know we'll be targeting. And we feel pretty good about the fall. My biggest fear right now is just EHD. We're dry to the point that it's approaching 2012 levels. Like it's scary up here right now. We're really, really dry.
Well, the deer that we shared on our social the young buck laying in the creek, that was on my West St. Louis County property.
Yeah.
And I never thought I'd have to deal with EHD out there because it's almost all timber. There's a couple ponds on the property, but the deer spend most of their time in the timber. But I guess he contracted it probably near one of the ponds, and it kind of freaks me out because it's already not the best hunting in terms of mature deer, but to know that that's in play right now, it's spooky.
You were talking about the vector, the ticks being the vector. If you think of the vector that carries EHD, it's a flying midge fly. So, they're tiny, they're hard to see. We call them a no-see-em essentially if they landed on you. They're everywhere. So that's why you see pockets of EHD everywhere every single year, but they vary in intensity. Hopefully that outbreak won't be too severe. It's these dry years though where we have some pretty severe outbreaks.
Yeah.
I have not heard of much so far this year, but usually it's about this time of year you start to hear, August specifically, you'll start hearing about it.
Start in August, and then the big die-offs I've seen have occurred September, October, and November.
Yeah.
Generally.
Right about the time I'm coming up to visit, Mark.
Well, and I don't want to be like doomsday predictor, but I just seen it enough. I mean, we have conditions that remind me of years we had EHD outbreaks. However, we've had other summers like this where we didn't have an outbreak. So there's so many different things that tie into EHD. It's very difficult to understand why it hits in the level that it hits when it hits. Mm-hmm. So every year is a little bit different. You just hope that it doesn't, basically.
Sure.
Yeah.
How's it hitting you, Mark, to know that Disappearing Act will not be reappearing this year? It's been an ongoing saga.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it was always fun to see his pictures, but we pivot to some other new superstar. Hopefully, we'll see. Antler growth. We had great rainfall early on, but then we dried up in mid-June, and we've been dry since. So I do not have high hopes for overall antler growth because we are so dry.
Yeah.
When do they tend to put on the most grow? I mean, you always talk like the people at Analogics always talk about like February, March, April being really important. But, do they really pack on like, say, 50% of their antler growth happens between like what period and what period? Do you kind of have a guess?
I would say 80% of it happens between May the 1st and July the 15th. So I always look very closely at rainfall in May, June, and July. Mm-hmm. And to me, it's very much a correlation between that rainfall and what your antler development's going to look like. Now, there are other factors that factor into that. What was the overall herd health going into the winter, the previous fall? So what were the acorns like? How healthy were those bucks 5 years ago when they were fawns? What was the acorn crop then? Mm-hmm. What was the winter like that those fawns went through? So their start in life oftentimes determines how they end up in life. So that's just as important as anything else.
Yeah. We've got a great article on DeerCast about should you harvest fawns? And Zach Frikurovich, one of our writers, he is a proponent of doing that. And I won't give away the full thing, but he's talking about weighing fawns and how weighing fawns is a great indicator. Like doing it consistently, same time of year, is a great indicator of overall herd health.
Yep, it really is. How they get their start determines what they look like through life, mm-hmm. But then they go through so many different trials and tribulations. Like it's an absolute, if you see a deer that is just maxed out and a giant, these mega giants, they're a walking miracle to get to that point because there's so many different things that nag them and just overall health concerns. They could get, wounded from fighting or wounded from jumping a fence or hit by a hunter and not recovered. The pedicle comes off deeply and therefore causes problems with that deer. There's so many things that affect overall health and ultimately antler development. The odds are stacked against them to get to age 6, and they're doubly stacked against them to get to age 6 and still have a clean bill of health and max out and optimize their antlers. It's not a high likelihood, frankly.
So from here till the time that they shed their velvet, what do you think? Maybe another 15% growth, 20% growth in antler development?
It varies from deer to deer. Some of them are late starters, and others they finish out quite early. So that always amazes me how spread out the antler shed is, and then how spread out antler development is. It varies greatly from deer to deer to deer. So it's hard to say. Those that are late are really suffering right now because there's just not a lot out there that's growing with nutrient transfer from the soil into their body, into their antlers. So I like those ones that develop early because they're the ones that get the most moisture early in the summer, and unless you're in a rainy pattern, which if you look at southeast Iowa and much of the Midwest, they've had quite a bit of rain. I was texting with Jeff Probst. He said he's had 5 inches in the last 10 days. I think Terry's probably had 5 or 6 inches in the last 10 to 15 days. So vastly different than us. We've had 2.5 in the last 35 days. So that's why EHD is quite pockety as well, because the nature of thunderstorms is pockety. Not everybody gets the same amount. You know, those storms, they flare up and they go down and they'll skip over places and whatnot. And it's those areas that get skipped the most that generally suffer the most in terms of antler development and EHD.
And not to keep going back to it, but that's a cool part of that rain station. You talked about going back to see what kind of rain totals you've had from May, June through July, and that kind of dictates how you feel the development will be. I go back and look at that. I set my rain gauge or, rain station there at my new farm on May the 12th, the day we planted. And I've had, close to 9 inches of rain since that date up there. So now in the last 30 to 45 days, obviously not a ton, maybe 2 to 3 inches, but we got lucky and got hit with a few good rainstorms here recently.
They're godsends when you get them this time of year. It seems like they're fewer and far between. The more I do this, the drier the summers seem to me. I can remember back in the day in the 90s when we first started planting our own food plots, I talked to farmers and they wanted an inch a week. So I always kept that in my mind. And man, there's a lot of weeks we don't get an inch. I can tell you that. It's a stark difference now versus the way our weather patterns used to be, certainly.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, we won't see much of anything until end of August, into September, to where it starts, if we're lucky, right? And it starts to get back on a normal weather pattern.
Even then, I've seen some very dry falls where it just doesn't rain, and it's frustrating. And on top of that, you couple the heat in with it. Like right now, we're talking about in the Midwest, many areas, 100 degrees plus for extended periods of days. Well, how long does that moisture get to go to work? Because those 100-degree days are going to suck it right out of the ground. So it's we're not in a favorable weather pattern right now. I hope it switches quickly, because we've had a very hot, 2 different hot periods here during the summer. One about 2 weeks ago, and then we're going into another one right now. Like it looks like extended heat for quite a bit of time, and that stresses the animals. They don't move as much, they don't eat as much, therefore they're not getting that nutrient transfer. So there's a lot of different things that really dictate a white-tailed deer's herd or their body health and then antler development. And I think heat is one of those stress factors people overlook a little bit.
Mark, do water holes play into your strategy?
They do, yeah, especially on dry years. Like I'm going to probably deploy some cameras on water holes here when we start deploying cameras. Like in a reasonable year where there's moisture, a decent amount of moisture, they don't seem to hit them as much. But when the temperature rises and it gets real dry, water holes are magnets.
And how are you guys building them, or do you even need to build them? Do you just have ponds?
In many areas we have ponds, but the ones that I've built here the last 2 years, I've built 3 in the last 2 years. They're probably the size of, say, a normal bedroom, so like a 12 by 12 or so, but they're round, or the size of a truck, and then we try to dig them deep so that they're going to silt through time. So we try to dig them 6-7 feet so that they fill up. And then we try to keep the banks fairly smooth so that it reduces any threat from EHD, so that you don't have that gradual, water receding and the mud coming out, so we try to keep the sides as severe as we can.
Okay.
So if it's severe, how are they accessing it? You don't have any kind of point of entry where it's just kind of a zero entry into it. It's severe, but you're hoping that the overall amount of water in it always stays pretty full.
Yeah, exactly. They get to it and they drink in it. I mean, there's still some slope to it. I mean, they don't have to go very far and they're able to drink. We just try to keep it, to the point that it's not that long gradual where a bunch of mud gets, if the pond drops 3 inches, you don't want 2 foot of mud exposed.
On the counties and farms where you can supplement feed or mineral feed. Have you guys tried any of that Analogics Oasis yet?
I have not as of yet. No.
It's pretty interesting. I put some in. I need to replenish them actually, but I have a couple water holes on the new property, and we set cameras up, and they hammered it. I mean, they really did like it.
And what size water container was it?
So it's that I didn't do that. In a perfect world, it would have been containers, or little pools or whatever. And I know there's some manufacturers out there that make those. I had existing little water holes that would probably be like the size of one was probably like the size of a Volkswagen, Okay. And so I took, because they have equations as to how much you use, for an area. And I actually I felt like that one was pretty big and fairly deep. So I put 4 bottles in that one, 4 different bottles in that one. And I spread it out, as I kind of poured it around it. And sure. They really did hammer it. I mean, we've had a camera on it, and especially when it was fresh, because like any mineral site, it will hold it through time, but not quite like the first 30, 45 days. And that first month, like they really hit it hard. So it was interesting to see it, honestly.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Free idea for Analogics. I bet they would really tear up a water hole if they flavored one of them Sharkleberry Fin.
They do have 3 different flavors. One was the regular like supplement gold flavor, I believe. I think one might have been apple. I forget what the other one was. Maybe a berry or something. Yep. Scott's shaking his head. But I don't know how much good it does or, the equation of how much you need for an area. But they said like you'd have to put a lot in there to harm the deer as far as minerals go. Yeah. So I don't think I overdid it necessarily. But it is probably time to replenish them. But it was interesting to see it.
Awesome.
Cool.
That's exciting. And minerals are legal in that county, you're saying?
Yeah. Yes, sir. Yep. So it's also we have a bunch of analogics out, and we have some mineral sites out. And I mean, the amount of daylight activity, and it's interesting because it's a small piece, but they're living right where we have our sites. And it's pretty interesting to see. Conversely, our other farm where we can't do any of that and where we have mostly a nocturnal deer herd, all of our pictures are at night. And it's just like, I kind of curb my excitement because it's like, hey, the best deer are on the farm where we can't supplemental feed, of course, put minerals out, and it's the deer are all nocturnal. And so I'm trying to curb all the excitement knowing that how tough it was out there last year. But we're trying to adjust and plant more food. Hopefully we get lucky with some rain totals, because we didn't get any rain after we planted 3 times last year on that farm. So it really makes or breaks it. And you guys have been saying that for years, but I think we're going to have a much different year if we can get lucky with the rainfall once we plant our food plots.
Yeah. Certainly. Well, hopefully this period we're in right now with hot and dry breaks soon, because it's forecast is not favorable up here. I don't know how it is down there.
No, for triple digits pretty soon.
Yeah,
not good. Before we jump into the real wild clip of the week, I'm curious, Mark. A lot of our podcast listeners are super DeerCast users, and I'm curious what you think might be one of the most underutilized of the new DeerCast features this fall. Like I think our podcasters want to be like as savvy with DeerCast as possible. So what should they be on the lookout for that may be overlooked by other people?
Boy, there's so much to unwrap there, Tim. I mean, there's a lot of cool features. My suspicion is the ones that are going to get used the most would be the wind direction through 5 days. I think that's going to be checked quite often. I think people using the tracking feature will be one that's going to be very, very advantageous. Just getting to a stand, sharing that with your buddy. Here's how you get in. Here's how you get out. Following on a blood trail, using it to, redneck GPS, spraying of a food plot or the planting of a food plot. I think tracking is one. The overall plot and area is one that I would recommend using right now if you're a food plotter, just to make sure you're not wasting any money on fertilizer or on seed or chemical. Make sure you know exactly how big that food plot is. And to me, our tool there that allows you to do that, I walk the edge of the plot and then I get the exact area within that plot. To me, it is spot on, man. It's really an impressive tool. So those are three that I like quite a bit. And of course, I love Rain Station. So, and then play with Rain Station through time, go backwards and look at history, and then go forwards, look at forecast. It's pretty cool. There's a lot to unravel, and I'm very, very proud of what that offering is. And finally, our offline maps are just second to none. If you're in an area, that's really good deer hunting without service, just make sure you go to offline maps before you get out of good service, and then work on those all day. They work quite well. You're not going to have wind direction, but just about everything else will be there. So our offline maps are second to none. I really love that feature, but you got to download them before you ever go hunting where you have good service. Do that at home, get all your sites, set up in there. All the waypoints and everything else transfer over into offline maps, but they're a special tool. I know my son-in-law, it's been a game changer for him up there at the ranch because he has no service up there. I mean, zero. And he's on offline maps all day, every day, scouting out bucks and dropping waypoints, and he loves that feature.
One of the kind of a hack or tip, especially here in the short term, is if you feel like you're, when you're at your property, if you might go like down on some bottoms and back up and come in and out of service, you want to just go ahead and put your phone in airplane mode if you are using like the path track feature in offline mode, because it will do some funky stuff here going in and out of connectivity. So that's one thing that we've learned a little bit, and we're working on continuing to improve and make it a super performing version. But in the meantime, kind of a quick hack would be to put your phone in airplane mode if you think you're going to be jumping kind of in and out of low level service, edge of service, we call it.
One of the fun things for us, kind of behind the scenes with DeerCast, is that it's never done. Like we continue to iterate.
There's a lot of job security here.
Did you say fun? But Mark mentioned that you can share your GPS tracks with other people, and currently you can't do that in DeerCast.
But it's coming. We're working on it right now.
But it's coming.
By the time the season hits, and it should be in there and working flawlessly. So we're excited for that.
Yep.
It's coming, and I should have prefaced that comment, but that shows you my confidence. I'm fairly certain it's going to be there.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, we're constantly, Mark and Terry and their crews and our crew here, we're constantly beta testing features in the background. So beta testing basically means we have a version of it before it ever comes out, in the App Store for everyone else. So those are the things that we're constantly beta testing and improving and working on and tweaking. And there's a lot coming down the pipeline.
Yeah, and that's for me. That's the fun part, is because like you get DeerCast now, but then we're also delivering more goodies as the season goes on as we create these features.
I had a gentleman that reached out on Instagram and was messaging me about the features and asking some questions, and I was answering his questions, and he had a couple suggestions, and he goes, although I'm sure you guys are working on that already, it was a few things that we're working on. I'm like, yep, great intuition there, and we're constantly evolving and improving, but we love hearing the feedback, and obviously it's, Mark and Terry from day one always said the videos and everything we do, it's created for you. Well, the app is like a super version of that. Yeah. It's definitely created for the user at home.
And if you think of what the app does, from predictability to the media player to the news feed, I mean, it's a lot of different things, Now we add maps plus all the tools within maps. It is one hell of an offering in terms of what it can provide you in terms of entertainment, information, your ability to plan out strategies and go in and hunt a deer. Like, I'm very proud of what it ended up looking like. It took us longer to get it there, but the one thing that we were all hell bent on was to make sure that it worked quite well. And that's where we're at right now. So I'm excited. I did a podcast yesterday with the working class guys, and I was able to take them through off air. I was able to take them through the app and show them every little feature within. And I mean, they were just so excited about it. They were really pumped up. So that's exciting for us to see as developers and the people that produce the app, to see other people's reaction to the offering once they get in there. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, because I think we've been hit over the head with it so much. We've been in it for a couple years now. Before the rest of the world could see it, it's like old news almost to the internal
you forget
group, right?
It's brand new.
That's right. So it is nice to see, and the comments have been very positive so far, and and look forward to seeing how people use it once they get into the actual season.
I can't wait to hear all the success stories.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
Okay, so last week on the Real Wild clip, we had a coyote sent in from Tristan, one of our podcast listeners. He's a Rack Pack member. He sent in the video of the fawn that had been eaten by, or that was being carried off by a coyote. This week, we're continuing the theme with more aggressive coyotes. Let's roll the footage.
Roll that beautiful bean footage.
That's a coyote that's barking at maybe 15 yards.
This was sent to me by our good buddy Mike Engelmeyer, Ingy, who
Oh, nice.
for some reason gets the most craziest clips.
What's he doing?
I don't know what this guy's doing. If you knew him, you'd know.
This coyote is just standing there barking aggressively at Ingy.
Hey,
Yeah, so the footage gets a little shaky there as he's yelling at it, but basically he's like, hey, get the heck out of here. And he didn't have a sidearm or anything, I don't believe, on him at that time.
Hey.
But I think he would have probably dispatched the coyote, would be my guess if he could have.
Was that last fall?
Yeah, I think so.
You know, you hear that sound often. You seldom get to see them make that sound.
Oh,
Yeah.
no. I've never seen that, especially that close up. And that's the beauty of everybody having a phone in their pocket. Somebody would have never, I've said this on the Real Wild clip a lot, but you would never believe a guy that said, man,
Right.
I had a coyote literally barking at 15 yards.
Yeah.
Like, sure you did.
Or you should see this picture of a tick that I found. The real the real issue here is just how blasé this this coyote is about a human's presence. And I don't know coyote vocalizations enough, but like when I see that, I think he's calling his
friends.
buddies. Yeah, they're gonna gang up on me.
Hey guys, I have a snack over here.
Right.
There's this real tall, linky. He's got a lot of meat
He's
on
gonna
his
be
bones.
stringy, but we'll make good work
The
out of
best
him.
part is you hear Ingy, and Mark's known him forever, like him say, hey, hey. I could just picture him out there in the woods yelling at this thing.
Right? Well, the last thing you want to do is turn and run.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But, I think in the last clip where we showed a coyote like that, we were talking about it. And I mentioned, like, in suburbia, they are brazen like that because they see humans all the time. But usually in rural areas, in the woods, like, as soon as you see them, they take off. Like, if they sense a human, they take off. So that's the scary part about this clip.
Yeah, that's a rare piece of footage right there. Thanks to Mike for letting us put that on the podcast. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. So this morning, I got a picture on my Reconic cell camera of a coyote running through with something that's in its mouth. I don't know. My assumption was it was small game, but because it was not large enough unless it was a limb or something. It was running kind of away, so I couldn't tell. It just could tell something was
Maybe
in
a
its
vape.
mouth. Maybe, but my guess is it was a small rabbit or something like that. But in general, it's just like, man, like these things are ruthless.
Yeah, well, you think it's not a small animal and it's got to eat multiple times a day. And I know they eat a lot of rodents and everything, but I'm sure they eat a fair amount of deer.
Well, like Tristan's clip, it was a fawn. I mean, a fawn in its mouth.
Yeah, which is the type of deer.
They're terrible on fawn mortality. I mean, that time of the year, they're scooping them up as fast as they can. If they find one, they're going to eat it. Same with our baby turkeys and all the little babies. They're the most vulnerable.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a cool clip. Appreciate him sending it in. We've had some really awesome Real Wild clips of the week so far.
Yeah. Yeah. Big time.
All right.
So we got a question of the day this week. We do not have a wildlife word.
Oh.
Because the question of the day is so good.
Oh, okay.
It's from one of our
I
buddies.
can't wait. So the question of the day is proudly brought to you by Leupold Optics. Be relentless.
Hey guys, Darren Ropp here. My question is about DeerCast. So one thing I've wondered about quite a bit is how big of a difference is it between like a great and a good or an okay? You see great and you get excited, and you see an okay and it's kind of less exciting, but realistically, how big of a difference is there between the two? Obviously, I know there's 13 different variables, and I'm just curious, like how many of those have to not line up to make it go from a great to a good or an okay. I guess if you could explain that a little bit, it would help me out a lot. So thanks, guys. Keep up the good work, and I love the podcast.
I think it helped me too.
Maybe Darren's trying to develop his own version of DeerCast.
Careful, Mark.
It's a trap.
I suspect the question he just asked probably goes through a lot of users' minds.
Yeah.
I think it's a very good question, and he framed it quite well also. He's right. There is 13 different variables, and you can't forget those have differing amounts of influence through the 13 different phases. So something that has a lot of influence early may not have as much influence late. So that question is a fairly complex answer. The answer is complex to that question because it is an algorithm and it's looking at a lot every second of the day in your neck of the woods, and it's changing through time. So a great right now may have taken fewer influencers of the 13 than it would at a different phase, or vice versa. So I always look at okay, great, and good as much as in a sense of time of the day or how much time they will spend during daylight walking around as I do in how many deer I'm going to see. Mm-hmm. So I always think like a great is optimum. There's a lot of different influencers that are in favor, and the deer are generally probably going to move a little bit earlier in the afternoon, or they may move a little bit later in the morning. So daylight activity is enhanced with more deer. You drop down to a good or an okay, that is going to be crunched just a little bit. And if you go all the way down to a bad, it may be quite late when they walk out of an afternoon, or they may only walk the first 30 minutes of the day. So there is a difference between all the different predictions, and oftentimes it has to do with how much daylight activity they're going to give you. And I know that's not a very succinct answer, but it's the best answer I can give you because there is no clear answer, because the algorithm is constantly working, constantly looking at those different variables across 13 different phases. And hopefully you see, though, through time, it is quite accurate. There's a big difference between a great and a bad, and then it is subtle in between.
Sure. Like most things that are real, it's complex.
What I find interesting in the summertime, and it's this way since we've launched it, you get a fair amount of greats and goods for as hot as it is. And I think to myself, there's no way deer are moving. And then I go out and I see deer moving. It's like, you know what? This thing, it's ridiculous because it's different. They have their summer coats, they have their summer patterns, and it's just a much different animal than it is, once you get into those fall weather conditions and the temperatures, that's part of the algorithm that, that's all factored into it. And so it is always interesting to me, especially you roll into like, we just had that buck moon, super moon, the last, I guess, few days ago, and the days leading into that, the deer were moving like crazy. Yep. And even up quite a bit later in the mornings too. So it's been fun to watch it and see, in 90, 100 degree temperatures, how well they're still moving.
Yep. Well, and one of the things I'm really proud of is just how much we obsess over the details in DeerCast, because we had a whole conversation, I think last fall, about the color shading of okay. Because I think it was like a yellowish, orangish, and it was giving people the idea like, maybe you shouldn't, like you should really temper your expectations. And we went with more of a greenish color because it's okay. Like it's still okay to hunt. And like there was a lot of thought that went into that. So
surprisingly, yes.
Previously it was closer in color to the more pessimistic predictions as compared to the optimistic predictions. So that's why we were like, that was probably a misstep of ours early on. And that's why we changed the color of okay, because in reality, okay, good, and great, they moved pretty good on all three of those. It may be a little bit later in the afternoon or a little bit earlier in the morning, but it's still a positive influencer.
You got to say it like, It's okay.
Yeah, and they moved okay. That's why we when we first came up with our terminology, we're like, well, what if it's a day where they didn't move well? We're like, well, it was a bad day. They didn't move, or they moved okay, or man, they moved great. So we kind of used the terminology that we hunters used anyway when we came up with all the 5 different predictions.
Yeah, it's not like we could say like, you're going to see 10 deer. Like that'd be dumb of us to say that.
Maybe we change bad to meh.
Meh. As you look at it, the other part about it, you mentioned, just general warming and our climate has been getting warmer the last few years and we're not getting as much rain. I feel like, last year you and Terry, the 3 of us are in a text chain a lot about the predictive model and the algorithm and making tweaks. And, we kind of talked about that. And you specifically were saying, really, I feel like the movement on good, and it's almost become the new great sometimes because it's so warm all the time. It was so warm all the way through the fall, and we're just not getting those cold temperatures until really late that we used to start getting in November sometimes.
Well, they acclimated to it, so like the prediction, if you would have taken any 3 or 4 day period that was warm and placed it in a normal fall, it would have been very pessimistic for movement. However, they kind of acclimated through it to the whole fall, so it became the new norm. The species still has to, move on. They're still going to rut and everything. So it was interesting to watch last year being so very, very warm, and I thought the algorithm did a pretty good job with predicting their movement on a tricky fall because we were above average for most of the year.
Yeah.
I don't want people to feel like our shows are a commercial for DeerCast.
Good luck.
We really do. Like, we use DeerCast. We're proud of DeerCast. And that's why we talk about it so much.
Well, it's become, it's like, Mark and Terry used to check, Wonderground, Weather Channel, watch the Weather Channel on, cable and like all these things every day. Well, now this is where we're spending, and it's a lot less time. You could see it a lot quicker. You could get the daily real quick, the snapshot, or you could dive into the hourly. So it's not that we're spending, I don't know how to say it exactly, but we're spending the same, we're putting the same amount of focus on this topic, but now it's all into one area for us, right? Yeah. So a lot of the app design was out of just pure necessity for us to be able to get everything in one spot.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you say, Mark?
Yeah, I got tired of people texting me going, hey, are the deer going to move this week?
Yeah.
Or I got tired of people going, hey, I need help tracking this deer. So, when you could solve problems for people, it turns into be something that's more of a utility where they need it quite often.
Yeah.
And it's been well received, to say the least.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
yeah, we apologize to the listeners or viewers if they feel like it's an ad, but we eat, sleep, and breathe it, and we believe in it.
Well, I think what it does do for those that do care or want to learn more, it gives you a 300 level course on how we're utilizing it, right?
It's college term.
So that's right.
And I made this point yesterday, and I think it's worth making again. Like if you download the app and you dive into those tools within Maps, you will quickly recognize that it was designed by a bunch of hunters. Like that is what we focused on. Like we talk about it in much of the material where we're promoting the app is we are focused on the white-tailed deer hunter specifically. And if you play with those tools, you understand what I'm talking about. They're built for you. We speak to you like a deer hunter would speak to you, and you'll interpret information that's going to help you make great decisions daily. Not to say the other apps out there aren't a great offering, because many of them are. I just do think our tools are much more focused on the white-tailed deer hunter and helping you have a better experience out there.
And we'll keep improving them.
We're going to keep improving them, and we're deer hunters just like you, and we love the resource. We love being able to make decisions that help us kill a big deer, and we're the ones that put all these features in there. I want to stress that, and I think there's a difference. It's been an interesting learning curve working with our developers for them to understand what we're talking about, but we keep pounding it until they finally get it. And I don't know that that's necessarily the case with some of the other apps out there. And that's not to speak poorly of them, because there's many things I see them do that they probably do better than our app.
Mhm.
However, when you get down to the tools you need to deer hunt, I'd put up ours up against any offering out there.
Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Okay. How about some shout outs?
Let's hear it, Timmy.
So we got a 5-star rating from Rhino Hog over on Apple Podcasts. He says, love the show, hunting info, and a lot of fun. Keep up the good work, and please get Mark on.
Heyo.
Huh. He didn't mention a last name.
Mark,
Maybe we should
anybody.
assume Mark Drury.
I would assume Mark Drury.
So Rhino Hog, you're welcome. We got Mark on.
See, listeners, you make the request, we come through. Look at us.
How you doing, Rhino? Good. Thank you for the kind words.
All right.
Heck yeah.
So we're down to the last segment of the show where I read off the newest Rack Pack members' names. Tim makes fun of me. I butcher somebody's name.
Make fun
Tim
with
throws a
you.
fake name in there. Last week was a killer. What was the name again? Zebco.
That one was when I was gone because Coondog was
that's
here.
right. Yeah, that's
Zebco
right.
Real.
Yeah.
Zebco Real.
You know what's
Fragile.
Okay, so last night I get home late. I came home from the farm, and the kids and Miranda, they just finished dinner. They're sitting at the table, and she's got her laptop up, and she's showing them clips of Bart Simpson calling Moe's Bar.
Oh, yeah,
leaving
yeah,
fake
that's
names.
great.
I didn't explain what. Basically, you're doing that to me.
Yep.
I'm Moe in this scenario.
Amanda hug and kiss. I need Amanda hug and kiss.
That was one of them. That was one of the
That's
ones.
classic.
Yeah. So, anyways, all right. So we have Seth Forster, Jose Fragoso,
Ooh.
Ricky Benefield, Aaron Thus, Attakashwan, Tim, Aaron Thus, Attakawashan. Okay, what is
You
it?
might be having a stroke right now.
What is it?
Aaron, the side of caution.
Err on the side of caution. Hold it,
That
hold
one-
it, hold it. I got this. I'll have to look for it
I got
later.
diarrhea.
We have that soundbite. It's Terry saying it. Err on the side of caution. All right.
I think I'm going to throw up.
That's Aunt Barb. So we got Steven Nickum, Colby Bone, Dustin Potter, and Tim Sylvia, the Maniac, 5-time former UFC heavyweight champion of the world.
Don't make him mad. You won't like him when
You know
he's
what?
mad.
We've seen people come up to him at trade shows and say, hey, choke me out. I want to see it. And it always amazes me when people do this to him. And Tim's he's like a big teddy bear. He's the nicest guy in the world. But he only takes it for so long as somebody like pestering him before he's like, okay, you sure? He's, yeah, I'm sure. It takes seconds. He'll put him in the chokehold and it takes seconds and he'll gently kind of set him on the ground.
Jeez.
Isn't it the craziest thing you've ever seen?
Yeah, no liability involved whatsoever.
That's what I'm thinking.
I need to get Tim on. Tim would be a good one to have on the podcast.
Maybe he
Absolutely
can choke
would.
one of us out.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, Tim would be an awesome guest
Yeah.
because he's so passionate about the outdoors and his farm and big deer, and he's a damn good deer killer, man.
Yeah.
He'd be a great guest for you.
Yeah. So he's a good, fun guy. But anyway, so that's it. That's it for the week, Timmy.
Yeah. Yeah. We should say, I think we're going to cut the Apple video feed of the show. It's caused way more trouble than it's worth for folks listening wise, buffering wise.
We took a poll on the Rack Pack,
Rack Pack.
and most people said it'd be fine to cut it. So we're going to cut that, and that way it makes the actual file size a lot smaller for the podcast.
Yeah,
as well.
like a factor of 10.
So again, always working for the viewer.
That's why we
listener.
exist for you.
And you can still get it in DeerCast over on YouTube, the video version. So if we're like these real wild clips, if you really want to see them, you can pop in and check them out over in DeerCast or over.
Listen and watch the show.
That's right.
It's like 2 shows.
Mark, any parting shots for us?
No, just appreciate everybody that's already downloaded DeerCast, and we look forward to continuing bringing you the best tools out there. And we want to say thank you very much.
Yeah. Yeah. We talked about this last week with Terry, but get it before deer season. That way you're not trying to figure maps out and fart around with it, but when you really need it, get it now so you're comfortable and confident with it. That's my parting shot.
All right. Man, I'm looking all around for air on the side of the caution, and I think we got rid of it on the soundboard. I can't find it. That's a misstep on our part.
Air on the side of caution. I think it's on the other page.
I'm looking at Alan. He's got his hands in the air. All right. Well,
You know what it was? I got too comfortable and I started to get fancy.
That's what happened. Mark, thanks for putting up with this.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks.
all right. Until next time, we appreciate everybody. Be safe. Peace out.
See ya.
DeerCast is now supercharged with maps. Get ahead of your game with killer new features like live Doppler radar, wind check out to 5 days, virtual rain gauges, GPS path tracking, and more. Plus, get our 14-day revolutionary DeerCast prediction and access to DeerCast Track. Prep, predict, and pursue with DeerCast.
We're adding new videos every week, so make sure to click that subscribe button and check out all of our amazing content. This episode of DoD TV was brought to you by Bass Pro Shops and Cabela's.